Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. 1st of February 2021. We have the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharamanji present the annual budget for the year 2021-22. In this particular backdrop, our discussion today on our Byju's news analysis would primarily focus on the budget 2021. Let's get started and understand what was this budget all about. First up, there was something historic when it comes to this year's budget. What is it? When you look into the past budgets, you had the paper presentations that which were made by the finance ministers. In this particular year, as is something unique, first time we have the representation of the tablet where we had the digital mode of presentation. For the first time, we have seen what is called as the paperless budget. In this particular year, we had the MPs who were able to access what this budget is all about using the tablets that which was given to the members of the parliament. So this is a historic step. That is because this is for the very first time since independence the budget papers were not printed and was presented paperless. In order to present this first paperless budget, we have the finance minister Nirmala Sitharamanji who had to ditch the traditional Bahi Khata and had to switch what is called as the Made in India tablet. The finance ministry earlier had also unveiled a mobile application where all the budget documents will be available. So this mobile application can be accessed both by the iOS users as well as by the Android users, and the language that it is available is in English as well as Hindi. So this will be applicable to the members of the parliament and general public as well at any place, and they would be able to access all the union document budget. So this is the introduction with respect to the budget. Now what we have to focus is on 6 pillars as given by the finance minister. When it comes to this annual budget, it is primarily structured, segmented, compartmentalized into 6 different pillars. What are these 6 different pillars? One is the health and well-being. Second is the physical and financial capital and infrastructure. Third is the inclusive development for aspirational India. Fourth is reinvigorating human capital. Fifth is about innovation and R&D. And sixth is about minimum government and maximum government. So the government in this particular case has focused on these 6 pillars. That is what our discussion would be under today's budget session. First up, let's take and understand what is this health and well-being all about. When it comes to India's program for the next 1 year, the first pillar happens to be the health and well-being. What is it about health and well-being? Primarily, the government focuses on 3 aspects. What are these 3 aspects? One is preventive in nature, next is curative in nature, and third is what we call as well-being. What is this prevention? Government of India will build what is called as the primary healthcare, or in fact it will advise the people to prevent a particular disease. If they are not able to prevent it, what are the measures that the government takes to cure it and to take care of the people so that the well-being of the people is taken into picture is what is the primary objective and the principle of health and well-being. In order to meet this objective, the government of India has reposed 2.23 lakh crore, marking a 137% rise from the year 2020 to 21. So what we see in 2021-22 budget is a rise of about 137% compared to the previous year. The government of India has also promised that it will be giving about 35,000 crores for the COVID-19 vaccination program. As of now, it has promised it will be giving so much, but in the near future, if there is more research that is required, more money has to be provided. The government says that it will meet all its obligations for the vaccination developmental program as well. So the first important pillar is the health and the well-being. In order to meet this particular aspect, the government has come up with a new yojana called as the Prime Minister Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana. What is this yojana or this particular program all about? This will be launched with an outlay of about 64,180 crores for over 6 years from this particular budget. This will develop capacities for the primary, secondary and tertiary care health systems. It will strengthen all the existing institutions as well. In case there are any deficiencies within a particular institution, the same will be upgraded updated in the existing institution. So the primary healthcare, the secondary healthcare, and the tertiary healthcare will be provided with new upgrades with respect to the hospitals. They will also create new institutions as well. Apart from giving upgradation to the existing institutions, they will also update the new institutions in those areas which do not have the primary healthcare. So what is the focus here? The focus is to upgrade the existing ones and also provide new institutions in those places where the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary hospitals are not present in that particular region. So basically, this will cater to all the important diseases and will also make sure the initial objective of prevention, cure, and well-being is taken into picture by the government. The next important factor is that this particular program or the Yojana will be in addition to the National Health Mission. We already have the existence of the National Health Mission, but the Prime Minister Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana will be an addition to the existing mission. So what are the features of this particular Yojana? Basically, support would be provided to about 17,788 rural and 11,024 urban health and wellness centers. As we spoke about, it is about changing, upgrading, and coming up with new institutions. So for the existing ones, upgradation will be provided both at the rural level and at the urban level. They'll be setting up of integrated public health labs in all the districts and 3,382 block level public health units in about 11 states. We will also establish critical care hospital blocks in about 602 districts and 12 central institutions will also be established. We will have strengthening of the National Center for the Disease Control. What is this National Center for the Disease Control? This is nothing but one of the institutes. Where is it? It is under the Indian Directorate General of Health Sciences under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. This particular institution was established in the year 1963. So what will it do? It will basically have research and development in epidemiology and also control of the communicable diseases. Why is this in news? That is because pandemic of coronavirus has been a major devastation for the Indian people, and this happens to be a communicable disease. So what we'll do in the near future is strengthen this particular center so that if it has all the inputs, it will be able to deliver the same to the government so that the government can take all the actions on time. So what we will have is the strengthening of the National Center for the Disease Control. There will also be expansion of the integrated health information portal. So what is this health information portal all about? This will basically connect all the states or the union territories to connect the public health labs as well, so that people would be able to access all their health data at one prescribed location. We will also have the setting up of 15th health emergency operation centers and 2 mobile hospitals as well. And finally, we will also set up a national institution for One Health, which will be a regional research platform for the World Health Organization for the entire Southeast Asia region. Now, the important question is, what is this One Health approach? Whenever there is a pandemic, let's say for example in the present scenario we have the COVID-19. So when we have a pandemic, it cannot be stopped, it cannot be prevented by one single institution. We cannot have the scientists who come up with this particular approach and say that we alone can stop it, or the doctors alone may not be able to stop it, or the government alone may not be able to stop it. If all these people come into picture but people do not follow these steps and measures taken by the government, again this will not be an effective implementation. So what we require is multi approach. So what is this multi approach? It is a collaborative and transdisciplinary approach where all the stakeholders, the scientific community, the health community, the government, the NGO, the private organizations who are into research and development all come together and ultimately make sure that this pandemic or a particular communicable disease is completely eliminated. So that transdisciplinary collaborative approach is what is called as One Health approach. So when it comes to One Health approach, what this particular program also intends to do is it will establish one of the national institutions in India which is also present for the entire Southeast Asia as well. We will also establish 9 biosafety level, 3 laboratories and 4 regional national institutions for virology, and this is being established in order to prevent any viral related infections in the near future. That is what we have to understand in reference to the Prime Minister Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana. Now let's look into the other aspects of this particular program. While we look at the health sector, health also has a direct relation to the nutrition. It also has a direct relation to the water supply, clean air, and also pollution as well. In case if there are any side effects to the health, it can also be a resultant of nutrition or water supply. So in order to meet the other agendas where one section will have an indirect impact on the health, what we have to focus is on nutrition as well. What has the government done here? We have what is called as the supplementary nutrition program. We also have what is called as the Poshan Abhiyan. Both these programs right now will be merged together, and what we will have is called as the Mission Poshan 2. So this Mission Poshan 2 basically will be one single umbrella scheme. So what will happen? We will have what is called as the Integrated Child Development Scheme, Anganwadi scheme, Poshan Abhiyan, which is currently existing, scheme for adolescent girls, and National Creche scheme as well. All these schemes will come together and they will form what is called as the Mission Poshan 2.0. This Mission 2.0 will ultimately impress upon the nutritional aspects so that nutritional diet is provided to the people in India. The second aspect is with respect to the water supply. In order to provide drinking pure water services, what we had was the Jal Jeevan Mission, which was earlier established for the rural people. The similar program is also being established for the urban areas as well. So what will happen? It will provide universal water supply to about 4,378 urban local bodies, which will mean that 2.86 crores households will have tap connections. So as of now, all those urban areas which are not provided with affordable drinking water facilities will now be provided with tap water, which can be used for the drinking purposes. So what we have as an existing program for the rural area, it is now being expanded to the urban areas. So this is the second aspect when it comes to the other features related to health. The third important factor is with respect to the clean air program. So an amount of 2,217 crores for about 42 urban centers. These urban centers should have a population of million plus, and such cities will be identified and the amount will be provided so that pollution in this particular area is completely eliminated. So in these areas, let's say for example Delhi or Mumbai or Bengaluru or Chennai, the pollution or clean air is comparatively not that good as well. So what we require is funding so that pollution control can take place. The fourth program is what is called as the scrapping policy. Recently in our CNA, we did also discuss about the green tax program as well. A similar one is what is called as the scrapping policy. So vehicles will have to undergo fitness test in automated fitness centers for 20 years in case of personal vehicles, and after 15 years in case of commercial vehicles. And once they go through this, the government will come up with suitable notifications as to what would happen with respect to these vehicles. So we did discuss about the same. We did discuss about the advantages as well. We did discuss about the disadvantages as well. So what are the advantages? One is the automobile sector will have a boost. Health sector will have a boost. Why? Because the number of people who would be impacted because of pollution will also see a drop. These are the advantages which we have already discussed in our day before yesterday CNA. So kindly look into our day before yesterday CNA to understand what is this green tax all about. Now let's look into the second pillar. The second pillar is speaking about physical and financial capital and infrastructure. Under this, the first important measure is the Atmanirbhar Bharat production linked incentive scheme. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat have been announced for nearly 13 sectors. What is this scheme all about? Basically, we have discussed number of times that India as a country is not that advanced when it comes to the manufacturing sector. So what are we supposed to do? We have to make sure that countries and companies come and invest their manufacturing bases in India. So what do? We have to incentivize them. So what do? We have to make sure that lands are provided to them, and we have to make sure that there's ease of doing business in all these regions. So in this particular backdrop, the government of India has selected about 13 sectors for which, if they are able to meet a particular demand and the notificational directions, they would be provided the incentives with respect to their manufacturing. So kindly remember, as much as we have the manufacturing processes that are expanding in India, we would become the part of the global value chain, and ultimately India will be one of the countries which will have core competence in manufacturing and cutting edge technology. That is what is the ultimate significance of this particular area. So what will happen ultimately? We will develop more key sectors, we will create and nurture global champions when it comes to the global community, and what we will also have is jobs that are developed with this production linked incentive scheme. The next important scheme is the mega investment textile parks with respect to the textiles. When we have to focus on the textile industry, we have to enable them to become globally competitive, attract large investments in the textile industry in India, and also boost employment generation as well. In order to accommodate all these programs, one of the production linked incentive scheme with respect to the textile sector is what is called as the Mitra scheme. So why was this Mitra scheme initiated by the government of India? That is because when you look at China or when you look at Vietnam, what these countries already have is a very good established textile sector. Or when we look at the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, or as we initially discussed, Vietnam as well, they have a competitive edge when compared to India when it comes to the textile industries. In order to we get that particular edge in the textile industry, the government has initiated this particular program. So in case our textile industry is much advanced in comparison to Bangladesh and Vietnam, what we will have is more jobs, more investment is what is the intention of this particular industry. Why is the government focusing on textile industry? That is because the textile sector is the second largest employment generator in the country after agriculture. Agriculture currently has the maximum number of people where it is giving employment to, and after agriculture it is the textile industry. So the government is focusing on the textile sector. Further, the government has also introduced 10% custom duty on cotton and an increase in the customs duty on the raw silk and silk yarn from 10% to 15% so that it can benefit the farmers who are present in India. Next, what we have to focus is on the developmental financial institution. The government in this particular case is planning to establish the development financial institution. What would be this institution? Basically, whenever you look at infrastructure projects, these infrastructure projects will take large number of years. It might be 10 years, it might be 20 years, so on and so forth. Banks are the ones who have to provide the loans, but banks of late are reluctant to provide the loans. One is because there is increasing cases of loan defaults, and two is because they have to give it for a long period of time. In case these companies don't pay back, it is the banks who will face a lot of losses. As a result, what we see is that banks are not providing loans to number of financial projects. In order to make sure that this lacuna is completely addressed, what we will have is an agency that will finance the infrastructure projects that are of national importance, and these projects may or may not be commercially having any returns as well. But this is important from the national perspective. So the DFI or the developmental finance institution will be one of the key catalysts and would fund all these important projects where others, the banks or other financial institutions, are not ready to enter because of the risks that are involved in this particular project. In order to provide these loans, what we will have is the establishment of the development financial institution. Next, what we have to focus is on the railway infrastructure. The government will come up with a plan called as the National Rail Plan for India 2030. What is the objective of this particular program? Basically, this will address all the inadequacies that which is present in the railway infrastructure. Basically, it wants to increase the share of the modal share. What do we mean by modal share? Let's say, for example, how many number of people are opting for the road travel? How many number of people are opting for the air travel? How many number of people are opting for the rail travel? So all this is what defines the modal share. So currently, according to the statistics by Railway Ministry, they currently go on to say that the number of people who are opting for railways is comparatively less. So in order to boost this particular modal share, which means the number of people who opt to travel for rail, that is what is the modal share. And at the same time, we also have to look at freight as well. What is it? This is about the transfer of goods from one place to another. Currently, when you look at transferring the goods from one place to another, it can be pushed from the road, or it can be made to move in the shipment as well, or it can be carried via air as well. So how are we going to increase the good transfer from one place to another by use of the railway is what is this modal share all about. So in this particular backdrop, the railway is planning to make sure that all the infrastructural bottlenecks that which is present in the railway will be addressed. So they have to improvise on the technology, so they have to improvise on the speed as well. Why? Because as of now, when you look into the transit time of the freight, it is nearly taking about 22 kilometers per hour when it comes to the freight. This has to be jumped up, this has to be boosted, this has to be expanded to about 50 kilometers per hour, so that in case there are perishable goods and foods, it can be ultimately able to reach from the source to the destination. This also means the overall cost of the railway transportation will also have to be reduced as well. So on one side, cost will have to be reduced, and there should not be much delay for the transfer of goods from the source to the destination. This is what the railway infrastructure plan with respect to the National Rail Plan for India 2030 is all about. The next program that we have under the second pillar is what is called as the Securities Market Code. What is the Securities Market Code? Currently, we have the provisions of the SEBI Act of 1992, Depositors Act of 1996, Security Contracts Regulation Act of 1956, and the Government Securities Act of 2007. What does it mean? It means that whenever there is a person or a company which has to comply by the rules, there are conflicting rules and regulations. There are different set of guidelines. One law may say that this is a particular rule that one company may have to follow. The other law might also give a conflicting opinion. So what is happening here? There is friction between two laws. In order to overcome these frictions, what we will have is all these laws will be replaced into one single code, and that code is what is called as Security Markets Code. So in the near future, all these laws will be gelled up, and what we will have is Security Market Code. Basically, this will help in easing of the doing of the business, cutting down on the compliance cost. It will reduce the frictional rules between couple of laws that are present in the financial market, and ultimately this will boost the confidence of the individual and companies which are investing in the security market. This particular code will also provide an investor charter as well, which will provide all the rights that which has been granted to the financial investors across all the financial products. Then the government of India is also planning to increase the FDI in the insurance sector. As of now, the permissible limit is about 49%, but this will be increased to about 74%. As a precautionary measure, under the new structure, the majority of the directors on this particular board and key management persons would be the resident Indians. We might have increased the FDI limit from 49% to 74%, but the key managing directors would be the resident Indians, says this new update. The government is also planning to change or revise the definition of the small companies under the Companies Act. As of now, the threshold for the paid up capital is not exceeding 50 lakh, but this will be changed to not exceeding 2 crore. As of now, the turnover says not exceeding 2 crore, but this will be changed to not exceeding 20 crore. These are some of the important changes when it comes to the second pillar. Now let's look into the third pillar. The third pillar speaks about inclusive development for the aspirational India. The first broad area that we have to focus is in terms of agriculture. We have one of the important programs that the government had released earlier called as Operation Green. What is this Operation Green? Basically, this was to stabilize all the important supplies of tomato, onion and potato, and make sure that there is availability of all these crops throughout the country, and there are no much fluctuations when it comes to the prices. But now this will be expanded, so it will not only include these three crops of tomato, onion and potato, but this will be enlarged to include about 22 perishable products. What these perishable products are, the government is yet to notify them, but as of now we have to remember, in order to control the price fluctuation and it is provided to people all the time, what we have is the Operation Green. The next important program is the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. What is this Agriculture Infrastructure Fund? After the harvest of a particular crop, it also has to be transported from the source to the destination, and it also has to be safeguarded from the pests as well, and it also has to be saved from the cold and the rigid conditions as well. In order to make sure that the crops are saved and it is protected, what we require is the post harvest management infrastructure and the community farming assets through interest subvention and the financial support which were provided by the agriculture infrastructure support. Now the same money can also be used by the APMCs as well. Earlier this particular model did not have the APMCs. Now the agriculture infrastructure fund can be used by the APMCs to expand on the infrastructure so that the crops can also be safeguarded as well. The next important scheme is with respect to the seaweed farming. What exactly happens? This is an emerging sector which has the potential to transform the lives of the coastal communities. Why? When we speak about seaweed, it can be used for chemicals, it can be used in the industrial sector, pharmaceutical sector, and also as food products as well. So when we are able to expand, it ultimately means the livelihood scope for the coastal community is also enhanced. So to promote seaweed cultivation, there is establishment of multi-purpose seaweed park that will be established in Tamil Nadu, says this particular budget. Apart from this, when it comes to the fishing, we will have the 5 major fishing harbors in Kochi, Chennai, Vishakhapatnam, Paradip, Petagut, which will be developed as hubs of economic activity, and the fisheries department will also see an increase in the budget allocation from 825 crores in 2020-21 to 1220 crores in this particular budget. So what we will also see is a boost when it comes to the fishing sector as well. Now let's look into the other sectors when it comes to the third pillar. The other sectors when it comes to the third pillar includes migrant workers and the laborers. So if we have to have an inclusive model, we also have to take care of the migrant workers and we have to provide them financial inclusion as well. How do we take care of the migrant workers? The government has come up with one nation, one ration card scheme. According to it, they would be also able to take the ration as well, a part of it, if they move away from their home state. Let's say for example, the government of India provides 10 kgs of rice and 10 kgs of wheat. Just a hypothetical number. Let's say for example, there is a family of 4 in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So this person who is looking for a job travels from Uttar Pradesh and now he is in the state of, let's assume he is in the state of Kerala. So the family would require the crops and this particular person would also require, let's say, rice and wheat as well. So this particular one nation, one ration card scheme will basically make sure that about 2 kgs of rice is taken by this person who is traveling from UP to Kerala, but the other 8 kgs of rice is given to the family which is present in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So this will basically mean the entire family would have what is called as food security. Then at the same time, we will also have a portal that which will be developed by the government of India where it will identify the unorganized labor force. Let's say for example, all the relevant information about the construction workers, the gig workers, the building workers will be taken up, and these people will be provided with insurance schemes and programs, health updates, housing opportunities, credit and food schemes for all the migrant workers. So this portal will take their updates and these people will be provided with health, education, insurance, so on and so forth. And finally, what we will have is the financial inclusion where credit flow will also be increased under the Stand Up India for the SC, STs and women is what the government has spoken with respect to the financial inclusion. Now what we have to focus is on the fourth pillar. The fourth pillar is basically looking at human capital. Why human capital? That is because humans are the resources. If we are able to provide them skilling and education, we can also use the humans as a resource. So what is the government looking at? The government is looking at improvising the education under the new education policy and also wants to provide new skills and updates so that they are able to take care of their own personal lives. So this reinvigorating human capital is speaking about education. So the government will focus on the school education, where nearly 15,000 schools will be qualitatively strengthened. It will also look at higher education, where the government is planning to set up higher education commission for India. And finally, what we will have is different umbrella structures where there is synchronization between different institutions in the higher education. So what we will have is number of institutions, let's say in a particular region. As of now, there is no synchronization, but what the government is planning to do is come up with an umbrella scheme such that they will have their independent autonomy for their own functioning, but to enhance the education they will also have what is called as synergy and cooperation. This scheme will also be introduced by the government in that particular state, in that particular region, for which the government of India in the near future will come up with modalities and the guidelines for the same. Apart from this, the government is also planning to launch the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, where it intends to provide enhanced opportunities for the youth for the skilling as well. Now let's look into the fifth pillar. This fifth pillar is speaking about innovation and research and development. What we will have in this particular regard is the National Research Foundation. As of now, when you look into the fund allocation for the primary research, most of the people say that we are not providing enough funding for the research and development. So one of the biggest reasons behind the lack of researchers in India is the lack of funds. So what this National Research Foundation will do is it will provide funding to the research and development in India. So it will ensure that the overall research ecosystem in our country is strengthened over a period of time with the primary focus on national importance. So for all schemes and programs which is of national importance, the National Research Foundation will provide the funding, says the government of India. Finally, we will have what is called as the National Language Translation Mission. What is this program all about? This will enable the wealth of governance, policy related knowledge on the internet present in different states to be jailed up, so that this can be used by prospective states as well. Let me give you an example. Let's say there is a policy program which has been initiated in the state of Kerala or in the state of Tamil Nadu. This policy program might not reach the state of Uttar Pradesh due to language problems as well. So what this National Language Translation Mission will do is, if there is a very good governance scheme and program or a policy initiative, the same will be translated and the same can be used by different states in India, so that they can boost the governance paradigm in their particular state. So this National Language Translation Mission is basically about sharing of the wealth of the governance to different regions as well as different states in India. Apart from this, the government has also spoken about the Gaganyaan mission. It has also spoken about Deep Ocean mission as well when it comes to the innovation and R&D. These are some of the important pillars which the government has spoken when it comes to the budget 2021. Now let's look at individual articles and try and understand what else has been spoken under this particular budget. The most important is with respect to the tax slab. So when it comes to the tax slab, it remains unchanged. So the government of India has kept the tax slab unchanged like the last time. So for 2.5 to 5 lakh, the taxation would be about 5%. For 5 lakh to 7.5, it is 10%. 7.5 lakh to 10 lakh, it is 15%. 10 lakh to 12.5, it will be 20%. 12.5 to 15 lakhs, it will be 25%. And anything above 15 lakh, it will be 30%. So the slabs will still be the same. But for the senior citizens, it has brought about a new update. What is the new update? In order to reduce the compliance burden, let's say there are senior citizens who are getting their pensions, or there are senior citizens who are getting their interest from the amount that they have saved in a particular bank. Such people, such senior citizens are exempted from filing an income tax return. Kindly remember, this is only for those type of senior citizens who are getting their pension money and the interest income, but this is not for all type of individuals. Let's say for example, tomorrow there is another rich person. If he saved some money, he still has to file the income tax. Why is this brought into picture? That is because when it comes to the senior citizens, in case they still have to fight the income tax, they have to go to one of the CAs, they have to shell out their money. It means that their saving is going away in the form of filing the income tax returns. In order to reduce this, in order to make sure that they have enough deposits under their own name, the government has come up with this initiative. Apart from this, the government has also announced that it is planning to set up what is called as dispute resolution committee. In case there is any dispute between the people and the government, this dispute resolution committee will resolve it, and the government will also come up with faceless income tax appellate tribunal proceedings as well. This is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about stake sale expected to fetch 1.75 lakh crore. What is this article all about? This article currently is speaking about disinvestment. So the government in this particular case has gone on to say that the government will sell its stake in two public sector banks. Which these two public sector banks, we do not know. The government is yet to reveal it, but the government has gone on to say that there are two public sector banks. These two public sector banks is where the government will lose its stake, and eventually it will be privatized in the next financial year, says the government. The government will bring all the necessary legislative changes in the parliamentary session to ensure that this disinvestment plans takes place. But what we as of now don't know is which are these two public sector banks. The next important factor is with respect to the strategic sector. When you look into the economics, there are two types of sectors. One is what is called a strategic sector, the other is non-strategic sector. What is this strategic sector? Basically, let's say the defense, or let's say for example railways, or let's say for example the space sector. These are the areas where the government needs to have most of the control. So those areas which the government will have the control and it wants to keep the control is what is called as the strategic sectors. The government has identified four areas. One is atomic energy, space and defense, transport and telecommunications, power, petroleum, coal and other minerals, banking, insurance and financial sectors. These should be called as strategic sectors. In these sectors, the government intends to make sure that it has bare minimum presence when it comes to all these sectors. But rest of the other sectors which are non-strategic in nature, it will be eventually privatized, says the government in its budget. So what does it wants to do? It wants to privatize the non-strategic sectors in the near future. So apart from these four areas, the non-strategic areas in the near future will be privatized, says this particular article. And at the same time, the government is also planning to introduce some legislative changes for releasing the IPO for the Life Insurance Corporation of India, for which legislative amendments will be introduced for the same, says the government of India. And at the same time, to make sure which non-strategic sectors has to be disinvested, what would be the priority, which public sector unit will be disincentivized, all this will be given by the Niti Aayog. So it is the Niti Aayog which will decide which institute or which organization or which public sector unit will fall under the hammer of the disinvestment. That is what this article currently speaks about. So what is the inference that we can draw? So this policy change which will be introduced by the government in the near future will basically make sure that there is minimum presence of the government when it comes to the non-strategic sector. Now let's look into the next article. This article says government agrees to maintain state share in the divisible pool of taxes. What is this divisible pool of taxes? We have the 15th Finance Commission which was appointed. It was having a major objective to understand what should be the money that when it is collected should be retained by the central government, what should be transferred to the state government. So this particular transfer that is given to the states is what is called as the vertical devolution. Let's say out of 100, what is the amount that has to be retained by the center, what should be given to the states is what is called as the divisible pool of taxes. So according to the 15th Finance Commission, it has said that 41% of this particular money will have to go to the state government. So the 15th Finance Commission has made sure that it has kept up to 41%. That is because when you go back to the 14th Finance Commission, it had set a benchmark of 42%. Now there is a reduction of 1%. That reduction is because we have the state of Jammu and Kashmir which is now converted into a union territory. That is why we see that 1% drop. So the government of India in this particular case has accepted the recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission to make sure that 41% is given to the state governments. This is what is called as vertical devolution. So a vertical devolution is where the amount is divided between the central government as well as the state government. Then we also have what is called as horizontal devolution. What is this horizontal devolution? Out of 41%, what amount of money should be provided to different states in India? So this is depending on the criteria such as population, area of the state, forest and ecology, income distance, tax and fiscal efforts, as well as demographic performance. Our focus today is primarily on two important factors. One is with respect to the population, the other is with respect to the demographic performance. What about population? Why is there a controversy? That is because when you look into the southern part of India, you have states like Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Telangana. They were able to control the population, which means the northern Indian states were not able to implement the population control measures. If money is given to the states on the basis of population, which is on the basis of 2011 census, more money according to horizontal devolution will be going to the northern Indian states, which means southern Indian states will be punished, penalized for effectively implementing the population planning. In order to overcome this particular issue, the Finance Commission, that is the 15th Finance Commission, has introduced a new term called as the demographic performance. So what is this demographic performance? In case there are certain states which are able to implement family planning programs, have done well when it comes to health, education and gender equality, such states will also be provided some amount as well. In order to manage the population criteria, the 15th Finance Commission, to give a boost to the southern Indian states, has come up with demographic performance. This is what we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about agriculture infrastructure and development cess. What is this cess that the government is planning to come up with? According to the government, the present scenario is where because of the pandemic, we do not have enough resources at our disposal when it comes to the agriculture infrastructure. In order to give boost to the agriculture infrastructure, the government in the present scenario is planning to come up with a cess. So this cess will be applied on petrol, it will be applied on diesel, apples and alcohol as well. So the cess would be about 2.5 per liter on petrol and about 4 per liter on diesel. Now the question that will be haunting all of us is whether the prices of petrol and diesel increase. The answer is a clear-cut no. How is that? Let me explain this for you. We have two types of petrol or anything for that matter fuel. It is what is called as branded fuel. The other is what is called as unbranded fuel. What is this branded fuel? Basically, when it comes to the branded fuel, it contains certain additives. So what is added is certain additives or chemical to this particular petrol. So what would happen? It will improve the mileage of the vehicle, it will reduce the carbon monoxide and it will also increase the performance of that particular vehicle. This means that when it comes to the branded fuel, the cost of the fuel will be comparatively more. If you've gone to the HP petroleum bunk, they will ask you whether it is normal petrol or power petrol. That power petrol is what contains additives. So this means that it will give more mileage, reduce the carbon monoxide and also increase the performance. But when it comes to the unbranded petrol, these additives are not added. Why am I explaining this? That is because as of now, the reason is that unbranded petrol was earlier attracting a basic excise duty of about rupees 2.98 and a special additional excise duty of rupees 12 per liter. These have been reduced to about 1.8 in the present scenario and the special additional excise duty has been reduced to about 11 per liter. So indirectly what it means is the government is reducing the excise duty, but it is adding it indirectly on the basis of cess. And at the same time, when it comes to the diesel, it has been reduced from 4.83 to 1.8 and from 9 to about 8 per liter, which means the government is removing it on one side and adding it up on the other side, which means ultimately it is not going to increase, but it holds on to be neutral. But now the question is, why is that the government is making this more confusing? confusing. That is because all the cess that is coming here will be used for the agricultural infrastructure. Earlier, we did not have a prescribed coffer where all this money should be only meant for the agriculture. But the cess that is collected can be used only for the agricultural infrastructure. But this also raises some concerns as well. What are these concerns? When it comes to the cess or its application, the entire money or the entire revenue that is generated will be used only by the central government. But when it comes to the custom duties, it was also shared with the state governments as well. So the primary concern here with this primary application of the cess, it is the state governments which are bound to suffer, says this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the fiscal deficit. What is this article all about? Here we have Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who has pegged that the fiscal deficit for 2021 and 22 will be about 6.8% of the GDP and aims to bring it back below 4.5% by the year 2025 and 26. Why is that the fiscal deficit has increased? That is because on one side the revenue is drying, on the other side the government is spending a lot, so there is expenditure as well, and as a result there is revenue drop and expenditure increase because of COVID-19. And as a result, the government goes on to say that fiscal deficit, which might increase to 6.8, can be brought down by the year 2025-26 to 4.5%. In order to understand this, what we also have to go back is to the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. According to this Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, the government has to make sure that it is somewhere in the range of 3.5% with respect to the fiscal deficit. But in the present scenario, it has gone back to 6.5%, which means the government is also planning to bring certain changes to the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. This is done so that over a period of time we would be in a recovery curve because of the vaccines and also because of increase in the economic activity. This is what this article currently goes on to speak. Now what we have to look at is why there has been a drop when it comes to the revenue. That is because when we go back to the year 2019, in the month of September, the government had reduced the corporate tax rates. The government also introduced the goods and services tax regime as well, which also meant that revenue over a period of time for the government was dropping. And at the same time, the government was in expectation that if it conducts the disinvestment activity, it might garner about 1 lakh crores when it comes to the disinvestment. Again, it is not able to meet up to the ambitious disinvestment agenda. As a result, revenue for the government is depreciating over a period of time. COVID-19 once again hit us all, and as a result, what the government should have done is to provide fiscal stimulus. If people have the money, they would also start buying more as well. This will also mean more growth activities in the near future. But instead of providing money to the people's hand, what the government is doing is maintaining fiscal conservatism. Why fiscal conservatism? When it comes to the Manrega program, in this particular budget, it has reduced the amount that which has to be sanctioned to the Manrega program, and the food subsidies amount is also dropped under this particular budget 2021 as well. So on one side, the recovery is very bad because of COVID-19. So this required stimulus by the government, but instead of giving the stimulus, what the government is projecting is fiscal conservatism, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Budget 2021 lays special emphasis on health, infrastructure and privatization. Explain. Second question, prudent public investment and a robust social safety net are what can prevent India from falling off the precipice of economic cliff. Do you think the budget promotes overall welfare or endorses fiscal conservatism? Critically evaluate. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with some positive feedback. In case you have liked our initiative, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.